Okay, so this time let's explore the other sample, which is this bottle that's getting struck in some way. So I've loaded it up into the sampler. It sounds like this. And you can hear straight away it's really tonal. It's going to lend itself really nicely. This could be, for example, some nice percussion, tonal percussion. I'm thinking probably bass sound. That's what I like making with sounds like this. So that's the route that we're going to go down. Now, before I do anything with it, I just want to make sure it's tuned correctly to my keyboard. So whenever you're using a found sound or even a sample from a pack, it's best to make sure that when you press a C on your keyboard, the sample is playing a C as well. So at the moment, if I press C, this is kicking out an F. So I need to transpose this up by 7 semitones, because the original sample was made at F, and when I press C3 it will play back at that default F, but I don't want that. I want it to play back at a C as well, and that way if I'm programming bass lines, melodies, whatever it might be, I know that it's going to be matching my keyboard and I can get everything in key. So now when I press C, this is pressing a C. Now, if I wanted to tune this precisely, I'd grab a sine wave from, any synth basically, and I would play the exact same note, and I would just adjust the detune on this until they were both playing much more tightly. But I'm not going to waste time getting the absolute fine tuning right. I just want to know that I'm roughly there on my keyboard, which we are at the moment. So if we're going for bass, I need to play much, much lower. Even lower than that. There we go. So that's a low G. And straight away we're in there. Now I'm going to take the percussive start out of this sound. So let's zoom right in on this. And we'll take that early part out. Let's go for where it's kind of approaching something a little bit more uniform. Maybe here. That'll do me. Now you could use the percussion in, you could have this as a kind of percussive bass. And I just want to make sure that I'm getting one of the zero crossings, which is basically where the waveform is intersecting our zero line, and this will mean we won't get any nasty clicks and pops. There we go, nice deep sound, I like it. And let's go and mess with our envelope. Now, the envelope that I've got here in this sampler is a little bit limited, so I want something with a tiny bit more complexity, because I have a very specific shape that I go for these kind of sounds. So I'm going to just upgrade this to sampler, which just gives us a few more bells and whistles to play with. And we're going to look at the amp envelope. So what I'm going to do is, rather than be restricted to this really sort of very tight transient at the beginning, instead, I'm going to bring the attack out and bring the initial point upwards. And if I just bring this down, you'll see what I'm up to, the way that I'm rolling with this. And then let's set the attack. Somewhere around there will work nicely. And then I'll bring this decay in. It's perhaps a bit too tight for me. And let's have a bit of release on this. Interesting sound. Okay, let's zoom out now. I've just realised I may not have... Oh yeah, it's a decent volume. You'll be able to hear this fine. So it's still got a bit of that percussive tinge in the top end. Let's get rid of it with a filter. I don't want to move too far into the sample. I could go just sub-bass, which it seems to, the resonant part of this sample. But I want a little bit of character at the beginning. So let's bring the filter down. And now I'll turn this up. In fact, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll overdrive the filter on this as well now. So I'm going to select a filter that's got a bit of character, modelled after a kind of analog filter. And let's crank up the drive. Have to take a tiny bit off of the main volume so I can have a little bit more to play with on the drive. And already we have got a lovely, lovely bass sound. And you can explore things like we've got a shaper here. Let's give this a go, add a bit of grit to it. Again, gonna have to take a little bit off of the volume. And that's just added a little bit of grit and character. And then let's just see, I can see we need to do a little bit of tidying up with an EQ, and then I think we'll call it a day because it's already sounding pretty damn good to me. In fact, I tell you what, before we do, we could add a little bit of punch to this. Another nice trick for your bass line, so I might as well dial some in. Similar to how you make a kick drum, what we're going to do here is go up by 2 octaves on the pitch envelope. So what's going to happen is the sound will start 2 octaves higher, and then we're going to sweep it down really, really quickly. Normally something like 100 milliseconds works, and it gives you a nice bit of punch to the sound. You can hear what we're doing, but I want to go really tight. I just want a little bit at the start. I'm going to take a bit of this saturation off, or maybe even this drive, one of the two. There we go, a little bit cleaner. And then finally let's add a touch of EQ just to clean up the low end on this. We'll go with a nice tight Q. And I tell you what, just for fun, let's see what happens if we use a little bit of a boost on the low end. And again, I'll just turn that down a touch. So if you remember, we started with a sound of a bottle being flicked, and we've now ended up with a massive sounding bass. And it looks like it's already in mono, so I don't need to worry about snapping it in. We've already got something pretty damn huge to work with. And again, think of all the different samples you could put in and all the different variation. Even with this, you could have a nice percussive attack on it if you wanted to allow a little bit more of the high end or a little bit more of the start of the sample. So there you go. Again, from a found sound, very, very quick. This time we've made a bass line.